What is going on, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, cats and dogs? Welcome back to Wrestling Geeks. As always, I'm your host, Ryan, aka Mr. Showtime, and apparently I have a lot of explaining to do. I do want to explain the absence of the show, and it's been kind of a crazy month, maybe crazy, in reality, it's been a crazy, 6 months for me, so, obviously, it's been over a month since I've done an episode, and I wanted to take the time and explain why I have been really, super, non-existent as far as the podcast goes and everything like that. As always, guys, I'm not gonna plug anything today. I do want to just explain what's been going on with the show, and let me go ahead. We'll turn the good old music down here. Perfect. All right, so I started this podcast back in 2014, okay? Then known as Rebellion Wrestling Radio. And to be honest with you, I've always had so much fun doing the wrestling podcast. I've had a lot of fun going to the WWE events and NXT events. Of course, the independent events, which are just, have such a soft place in my heart right there. And it really became a part of who I was. Now, prior to doing this podcast, I was, and still am, but I was playing music steadily in a band. And we would play, every weekend, sometimes in the middle of the week, a couple times a week. So that really consumed me. I've always been either on stage or in, some type of entertainment. That's just something that I do. The reason that the podcast kind of came about is I've always been a huge professional wrestling fan. Ever since I remember watching Sunday Morning Superstars with my dad, back in the 80s, more so in the 90s, but I remember watching, Hulk Hogan and the Red Rooster and all those guys back in the day. And then the reason I started the podcast is that back in 2014, we lost our drummer. They didn't die or anything; they just moved away. Or not our drummer, our bass player moved away. And at that point, we usually take some time off during the year, towards the end of the year, and just to kind of spend time with our families and holidays and all that stuff. Only this time it turned into almost a 4-year hiatus. And the reason I started the podcast is I was I was in a rut. I did not know what to do with myself. I'm not really the most social person in the world. I'm socially awkward. I'll go out with friends here and there, but I've always been consumed with a project that I think that, was to my detriment at some times where, I wasn't able to, I didn't go to the bar as much. I didn't go, never went to a club in my life. I never, never went to go dancing or anything, so whatever kids do nowadays. So when I stopped playing music for about 4 years, I didn't know what to do. So this is, about partway into the first year, and my wife actually recommended. She's like, "Hey, you know what? You love your wrestling." And she knows that I've thought about trying to get into doing some kind of podcast or radio or something like that. And she's the one who actually suggested it. She's like, maybe you should do a podcast. Basically, I think that was her just trying to tell me to find something to do with my time, which I totally understand. So I started actually another podcast that was called the Hardcore Geek Podcast. Still kind of exists from time to time. And I just really wasn't getting anything out of it. And she recommended, she's like, well, you love wrestling, everything about, wrestling. That's my whole life, and she recommended doing the wrestling podcast. And I kind of toyed with it back in 2014. And then, we started doing it officially in 2015, and it was really rough, It was recording on either a phone or recording on audio formats on my tablet, and it was just, the quality was crap. But we got a lot of good, we got a lot of good listens, and it was a lot of fun with the interviews with different talent, and having my co-hosts and friends come over and join the show, and it really turned into a steady thing. You fast forward to 2017. To be completely honest, I was battling, and still am at some point, battling depression. And I would get burnt out, and I would kind of shut myself out. And, I would try to keep going with the podcast and record, different retrospectives with some friends, and doing interviews with talent, either at independent shows or through Skype or through, or even literally just in person, having them come over into my home. But, with the mental state that I was in, and I don't want to sound like a crazy person, but that's just, how it was, I wasn't getting anything out of it at all, even though it was something that I absolutely loved. And it turned into almost another job. And, you combine that with, normal adulting stresses and financial stresses, and then to top it off, I had some family issues with a very close family member battling a disease to this day, and being in and out of the hospital. So that really took up a lot of my time, to the point where up to, I want to say about 2 to 3 weeks ago, I had made the decision to shut this podcast down, to discontinue it indefinitely. It was very spur of the moment. But I felt that it was pointless to have a podcast, and pointless to have that hanging over my head if I wasn't able to put myself into it 100%. That on top of being able to, just watch the product and review the product, whether it be WWE or Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, or even the independents. It became a lot. That really just changed literally last night. I went to WWE NXT last night in Cleveland, Ohio. And before we get to NXT, another reason that I was taking some time off, or the reason that I was going to, in a way, shut down the podcast, was the fact, and this is not calling anybody out, but the fact that it is very, very difficult to rely on a normal or semi-normal co-host. Doing these podcasts solo, it's actually more difficult than you would think. It's always good to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, to talk to bounce a conversation off of. And I found during this time that, you would have people who would be on the show regularly, and it happens, life gets in the way. But shows would be canceled last minute, recordings would be canceled last minute because they can't make it. So I don't have time to reformat a show. And that just really sucked, It sucks having, trying to rely on people who say they're going to be there when it becomes a normalcy for them to flake out and not be there and not show up and not call in for a podcast. And that's fine. I get it. It's not I don't want to call anybody out or say anything bad, because it's nobody's fault. It just became a detriment to the show because that was something that I relied on. And it really just made it difficult for me to enjoy doing this podcast. Up until last night, I went to NXT. Originally was going to go by myself. I had an extra ticket. I had a friend who had something that came up that couldn't go, so I had an extra ticket. And then I was contacted. I threw it up on Facebook. Hey, does anybody want to go to this NXT show? I got an extra ticket. It's free, and it sucks going to a wrestling event by yourself. I know there's people out there. I know there's people that listen that have done that, and I've done that numerous times, and it just sucks, especially if you're a socially awkward person like myself or a very shy person like myself. It makes it hard to kind of jump in conversations with people and not feel completely awkward. So I was contacted by a friend of mine, professional wrestler Big Mo, guest on the show multiple times, and he joined me for the evening last night, and we ran into a lot of other local talents that I've had the chance of meeting, had the chance of being on the show, and being at NXT last night and experiencing it not just by myself and experiencing the whole, it's just an electric atmosphere. And the whole thing with Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae in the main event, and seeing talent that you've seen on the indies, and now they're on the main stage of WWE. It really kind of sparked my love for professional wrestling again. It's not like the love for professional wrestling went away, but it made me want to do this podcast again. It made me want to get more involved in wrestling. Like, I know no matter where you're listening, I'm sure, you gotta love your local wrestling scene. If you're a professional wrestling fan, if you are a fan of your independents, I will say that Cleveland, my area, was just showing last night just how tight the wrestling community is around here. It was really cool being a part of that, and that just really made it feel like I wasn't alone, if that makes sense, even though at some points I do go to these shows alone. But last night, really showed me that the professional wrestling community, whether it be where I'm located in the Midwest, or whether you're on the East Coast or anywhere else in the world, Japan, South Africa, Australia, Ireland, the UK, Germany, everywhere. If you're a professional wrestling fan, you can gravitate towards other professional wrestling fans. And at the end of the day, you are a family. And that's something that I'm going to work on myself, I'm going to try to be a little bit more open, like say hi, high five some people, I'm on this show and I talk, to you guys, the listeners, and it may seem like I am very outgoing and whatnot, but I'm not, and that's something that I'm looking to change. And this is kind of a very, I guess, like an intimate podcast, because I never really talk about my personal, quote unquote demons or mental issues or anything like that. But I figured for the sake of this episode and the sake of explaining why I haven't been doing episodes of Wrestling Geeks, it's just been the fact that there's just been a lot going on. But I wanted to kind of take the time and record this episode and just say that I'm going to give this another try, and I'm going to be here every week. And whether it's recording an episode with a rotating guest host, which we have some rotating guest hosts lined up, which is going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be the new format for the show, by the way. If it's just me, great. If not, we're going to have some rotating guest hosts, local professional wrestlers, people in the industry, referees, ring announcers, you name it. We're going to have them on the show. And every episode is going to be fresh. And that's the whole goal here. And I just wanted to say thank you for, the people that have actually taken the time to listen to this show. This is just something that was a hobby that, is still, in a way, a hobby. But, you check and you see comments and you see people listening, not just from my city or my country, but from other countries, and that really puts a smile on my face. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this again, because I don't know, maybe I was doing something right, you know. Regardless, I am super excited to officially announce the relaunch of the podcast, relaunch of Wrestling Geeks. And you can catch us every week right here on Spreaker.com. We're also on iTunes. We are working on getting... we're also on iHeartRadio, if you listen on the iHeartRadio app. We are on Spotify, and we're working to get on Stitcher as well. So that's really all I have for this quick explanation episode, and I hope I didn't bore anybody too much, but I wanted to explain why I have taken some time off, and I hope my explanation carries some weight, and I hope that you guys stick with the show, because I have a lot of cool stuff lined up, including next week on the 10th. I will be in Akron, Ohio for AIW's Enter the Dragon. There's gonna be tons of kick-ass matches there, including an appearance by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. The next night, we got WWE Fastlane. It's going to be in Columbus, Ohio. I'm still trying to score tickets to that. If I can't, we'll watch it on the network, but we're going to do an immediate after the show recap, because this is the last show before WrestleMania. It is WrestleMania season, and what better time to kick the show back off than right now. Also, we're going to be bringing on some other interviews. I have some archived interviews we're going to throw on the website as well. But if you want to check us out, all of our past episodes are on iTunes. And then if you want to check out the website, it's hardcoregeekcast.com. Go to the Wrestling Geeks page. There's going to be a description of each episode there. You could follow me on Twitter personally at Mr. Showtime84. And then if you want to follow the show, it's Wrestling Geeks with 1G. Other than that, guys, I really, truly appreciate all the listens, the downloads, the subscriptions, and just taking the time to listen to some, 33-year-old nerd that just loves the wacky world of professional wrestling. Until next time, have a good night.